Hey there, we're going to address a difficult subject today, and that's death in the home. In the state of California, if there's been a death in the home in the past 3 years, you've got to disclose it. It doesn't matter if it's due to natural causes, accident, suicide, homicide, or any other cause that could take place. It's considered a material fact against the home, and it needs to be disclosed. But don't worry, there's professional ways to handle it, and it shouldn't affect the sale of your home in any way whatsoever. If it occurred more than 3 years ago, it is a legal obligation that you have to disclose it directly to the buyer. However, if it is longer than 3 years, it's called a direct inquiry. And if the buyer or the buyer's agent directly inquires as to whether or not there's a death in the home, then it would have to be disclosed. However, if it's not asked, it's not something that legally needs to be disclosed in the state of California. There's an exception to this law, and that exception is if someone passed away due to AIDS-related complications. So if it has anything to do with HIV or AIDS, and the complications are related to that in any way whatsoever, it does not need to be disclosed. That's a protective law in the state of California. If the death was a high-profile death, a gruesome murder that could stigmatize the property and affect its market value, it may still be considered a material fact and should be disclosed. Banks or trustees selling for parties typically don't have to have this requirement. They don't have to make this disclosure. So be aware of that when you're purchasing a foreclosed property. However, just rest assured, here at Team Goolsby, we know exactly what to do, how to disclose it. More information is usually better. And I've never had one in the 22 years I've been selling real estate that had a problem selling because of the death in the home. There are some people that would prefer not to purchase a home that's had a death in it, but we will find you a buyer. You don't need to worry about that. And I don't believe that I've ever had an incident where it's affected the value of the home. So we at Team Goolsby will provide the correct disclosures and make sure that your home is sold and well taken care of, and that your legal liability has gone away with. I want to share with you a couple of experiences I've had. I recently worked with an out-of-area home seller, and while giving the listing presentation, I noticed that the front door was kicked in. They did have me come in through the garage, which was a little bit different, but when the front door was kicked in, and then I noticed that the tax records, the name of the seller was different. The first name was different than on the name of the tax records. So with that being said, I asked, has there been a death in the home? And they said, what made you ask that question? And I said, the front door has been kicked in. It looks like there might have been a welfare check. And sure enough, there was a welfare check and a death in the home, which is no problem. We had no information about the death because it was a welfare check. The neighbors stopped seeing the gentleman that was their friend come out of the house, and they just got concerned. And so they called the police. The police had to force entry into the home, and they did find that the homeowner was deceased. And so his son was in the process of selling his home, and we took care of it. It wasn't a problem at all. Got the door jamb fixed and make sure it's been disclosed, and we attached the disclosure to the listing so people could be aware right up front. And we just simply disclosed what we know, which wasn't a lot in that situation. I had another incident outside of our area, and in this case, the home was beautiful. Everything looked perfect. We had no information regarding any deaths in the home at all. And then my interested client, after they'd already submitted an offer and they were in escrow, Googled the address of the home. And at that time, she found out that there was a murder-suicide that took place in the home. So definitely could be alarming. But they thought on it, they pondered it for a long time. They learned as much information as they could by reading all kinds of articles, and they decided to move forward with the purchase of the home. They're still in that home. They're delighted. They're happy. They're raising their children there. And they're certainly glad they didn't back away just because of the Googling of the incident that they found in the home. However, it was a little traumatizing for them, and I definitely think it would have been better if they just knew right up front. They still would have purchased the home. But when it feels like somebody's hiding something from you, that's alarming, and you want to know why. So definitely disclose. It protects you, and in most cases, it doesn't hurt you in any way whatsoever. So before I became licensed in the state of California, I was licensed in the state of Tennessee. And although I've lived in California almost all my life, I spent a short period of time in both Tennessee and Missouri. And during that time that I was in Tennessee, I had a client that was quite wealthy, and we went and saw a beautiful home in an upscale neighborhood. And the home was kept pretty much to its original condition with the exception of the dining room. The dining room was beautifully redone. The floors were gorgeous. I absolutely was very impressed. So we went and viewed the outside of the home, and I noticed there was a neighbor that was like peering over the fence, kind of like on tool time. All you could see was her eyes, and she was just peering over. So I walked over to meet her, and she said, "Do you know the owner committed suicide?" And I said, "No, I don't know anything about it." She says, "Yes, it was in the dining room." So putting two and two together, you could easily figure out why the dining room had been remodeled. That was not disclosed to us. Needless to say, my buyers did not purchase that home, and it wasn't due to the death in the home. It was they were really concerned what was being hidden. If you're hiding that from us, is there something else you're hiding? I think it's best to just be upfront and give the full details of the situation and move forward. If the facts are the facts, let's keep ourselves out of court and make sure we're covered in any way whatsoever with any liability. Suicides can definitely put a stigma on the home. And unfortunately, in this particular situation, the children didn't know, and they found out by riding the school bus to school. At least this was the talk of the neighborhood, and they found out that their dad had committed suicide in their home when they were on the school bus, and told by another friend whose father did the remodel inside the dining room. So these can be really difficult situations, and there's certainly a tactful way to handle them. This next particular situation I have for you is something that happened to a friend of mine while he was out showing homes. He was showing a home, and while viewing the outside of the home, he saw two high heels sticking out from under a bush, and he reached down to pick up those high heels, and there were feet attached to them. This is the situation I never want to handle. I never want to come on this situation. I remember watching the news that night and seeing his truck on the news and thinking, wow, is that so-and-so's truck? And then waiting a few minutes longer, and he was being interviewed for a really gruesome story. So as a realtor, that's something I never want to stumble onto. So if that's your situation, I'm not your girl. You find someone else to take care of that. That was pretty alarming. Here's a couple of court cases that have helped us come to these conclusions. So first would be Reed versus King, and this took place in California in 1983. This is a landmark case that created the disclosure of the death law in California. Reed purchased a house in Nevada City, only to learn from his neighbors after he moved that a woman and her 4 children had been murdered in the home 10 years prior. The seller and the realtor had allegedly gone through great lengths to keep the information from Reed after telling neighbors not to talk to her. So the realtor and the seller had told the neighbors not to talk to the purchaser of the home. Here's the ruling. The court ruled that if a death, especially a multiple murder, significantly impacts the market value of a home, that it's a material fact and it must be disclosed. This led to California's current law regarding disclosure of any death on a property within the last 3 years. When a death occurs in a home, the property becomes stigmatized. In the real estate world, these cases are often highlighted, and the tensions between the seller's desires to keep the home values high and the buyer's right to know the home's history. So it can create some tension. Here's some of the most high-profile cases involving deaths in homes and their impact on real estate. Of course, most of us who've been around a while know the story of JonBenét Ramsey in Boulder, perhaps one of the most famous unsolved cases in American history. In 1996, the death of 6-year-old JonBenét Ramsey took place in her family's basement, and it made history. This property was notoriously difficult to sell. The Ramsey family sold the house for $650,000 in 1998 at a loss. Since then, it's been a struggle to sell the home, and it's been on and off the market for decades. Most recently, in 2004, it sold for over $6 million. It was pulled from the market without the sale. It was listed for over $6 million. It was pulled from the market without a sale. Despite high-end renovations, the home remains a true crime landmark. It attracts tourists and looky-loos, which deters most serious luxury buyers. Since Boulder, Colorado is a classy area, and it's definitely in a luxury neighborhood. And then there's the whorehouse in New York. In 1974, Ronald DeFay Jr. murdered 6 family members at 112 Oceanside Avenue. A year later, the Lutz family moved in and they left after 28 days, claiming the house was haunted. Here's the legal conflict. The Lutz sued for various reasons, but the house's value was permanently tied to the whorehouse brand. Subsequently, owners, however, have reported 0 paranormal activity in the house. So the strategy: to disclose tourists, owners eventually changed the whorehouse number from 112 Oceanside to 108 Oceanside Avenue and removed the iconic quarter moon windows that were in the house. It last sold in 2018 for $850,000, which was considered fair market value for the area. And then there's our Miami, Florida mansion. This was a fashion icon that was murdered on the front steps of this home in 1997. The transformation, unlike private residence, this property leaned into its history. It was sold in 2000 for $19 million and again in 2013 for $41.5 million. So what'd they do? How'd they overcome this? Today it operates as a luxury boutique hotel. The site of the tragedy has effectively been commercialized, proving that high-end, high-profile deaths can sometimes increase the property's value if it can be turned into a destination. The Sheraton Tate home in Los Angeles, California in 1969, the Manson family murders actress Sharon Tate and 4 others at 10050 Cielo Drive. The disappearance: the owners at the time, Rudy Altrabalio, struggled to rent it and eventually sued for the loss of the property. Musician Trent later lived there and recorded the downward spiral in the home. And ultimately in 1994, the house was completely demolished to erase the stigma. A new, much larger mansion was built on the site with a new address of 1006 Cielo Drive. 1066 Cielo Drive. For those of you that are interested in this kind of activity, can look it up. Again, it's in Los Angeles, California. To distance the property from its past, and then it was sold in 2022 for approximately $44 million. So there's absolutely ways to overcome this. In summary, the impact of real estate shows that high-profile murder cases can, in specific ways, increase home values if it's marketed correctly. It's not something I'm encouraging. It's probably something I'm not gonna encounter in the area of California where I'm working, but things can be done, and the best thing to do is to disclose it. So again, market values often drop between 10 and 25% compared to similar homes in an area when there's high-profile murders that take place and stigmas that are attracted or attached to the home. They typically sit on the market for 45 to 50% longer than homes that are not stigmatized homes. And the erasure trend sells high-profile crime scenes are often by changing the address, repainting, removing some iconic features in the exterior of the home, but often bulldozing the structure is the best answer. And in those multi-million-dollar homes, that can be very affordable if the return on investment is right. So again, what do we do when we have a murder that takes place in the home, a death by natural causes, a suicide, an accident, anything of that sort? We just simply disclose it. We disclose it, we handle it right up front, and in most cases, it has very minimal effects on the home. This is Tammy Goolsby with Team Goolsby Real Estate. If you've got more questions, concerns, thoughts, please reach out to me. You can reach me at teamgoolsbyrealestate.com or at tammy.goolsby@cbnorcal.com. And my phone number is 209-332-0118. That is my direct line. If you don't reach me right away, you can also try our business line where you can get myself or somebody else on the team, and that is 209-332-0118. 0250. Thanks so much for tuning in. Hopefully this wasn't too overwhelming, and I look forward to speaking with you in the future. Have a wonderful day.